This is part 74 of ASP.NET MVC tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss cache profiles in MVC. We'll be working with the same example that we started in part 73, so please watch part 73 from the ASP.NET MVC tutorial before proceeding with this video. Now, to cache the data returned by the index action method for 60 seconds, we would use output cache attribute, as you can see here. Notice that we have set duration to 60 seconds. So here we are specifying output cache settings within the application code. So specifying output cache settings within the application code can have the disadvantages as listed here. Now, if we have to apply the same cache setting, that is a duration of 60 seconds, for several methods within our entire application, then we will end up with a similar duplicated code at all those places. And later, if we want to change the cache setting, for example, I want to change the setting from 60 to 120 seconds, then we will have to make modification at all those places. So maintaining the application code becomes much complicated. And also, since we are changing the application code here, and if we want to have those changes taking effect in the application that's already deployed, then we need to rebuild our application and redeploy it to all our production servers. So to overcome these disadvantages, we can specify these cache settings within the web.config file using CacheProfiles. And here is an example of a cache profile within web.config file. Let's look at that in action. So now if I want to cache the output of this index action method for 60 seconds, we would use output cache attribute and set duration to 60 seconds. But we don't want to hard code the cache settings within the application code like this. We want to move these settings into cache profiles within web.config file. So within web.config file, under system.web, we want to specify caching section, and we want to specify output cache settings. So we want to use some output cache profiles. So let's add a cache profile. So give your profile a meaningful name. So here we want to cache the data for 1 minute. So I'm going to call this 1 minute cache, or you can give it any meaningful name you want. And let's specify the duration. So duration is going to be 60 seconds. Vary by param is going to be none. So I want to cache only one response of a controller action method. So I'm setting vary by param to none. We discussed in detail about this vary by param in our ASP.NET video tutorial. So if you're new to caching concepts, please watch those videos. Alright, so at this point we have a cache profile specified within our web.config file. So within the home controller, instead of hard coding cache setting like this, I'm going to use another named parameter. So this constructor of this output cache attribute has a named parameter called cache profile, as you can see in the IntelliSense. So let's specify cache profile. So cache profile is equal to whatever is the name of your cache profile. What's the name of our cache profile? It's called 1 minute cache. So let's copy the name, paste it here. Let's build our application, and let's navigate to the index action and see if that output is cached for 60 seconds. So the first time the form loads, it's going to load it by executing the action method. Look at that, it's loaded at 21:46. Let's refresh this. Look at that. Even after refreshing, the time is not changed, meaning we are getting that output from the cache, not by re-executing the action method. Alright. So at this point we have our cache settings within the web.config file. So what are the advantages of using cache profiles? Now, one of the advantages is we have one place to change the cache settings. So no matter at how many places you have used this 1 minute cache profile, tomorrow if you want to change the duration from 60 to 120, you just change the duration right here. And at all the places within our application, we are reading the cache profile settings from the web.config file, that is from that one single location. So all those references will automatically use the updated value. Okay, so one of the main advantages is that we have one place to change the cache settings, so maintainability is much easier. And since the changes are done in web.config file, we need not build and redeploy the application. Simply make the changes to your configuration file, save, and you're done. Let's now look at using cache profiles with child action methods. Now, within our home controller, if you remember, this get employee count is a child action method that's invoked from the index view. Okay, now let's see using cache profiles with this child action method. Okay, so since this is a child action method, let's also decorate that with child action only attribute. It's not mandatory, but to be explicit about it, let's decorate that with child action only. Let's build the solution and let's refresh this view and see what's going to happen. Look at that, we get an error. Duration must be a positive integer. And if you remember, within web.config file, duration is set to 60 seconds, which is definitely a positive integer. So for some reason, the cache profiles are not working with child action methods. And to make these cache profiles work with child action methods, there are several ways. And one of the ways that I am aware of is by creating a custom output cache attribute. If you are aware of any other better way of achieving it, please leave a comment either on this video or on my blog. Okay, so we are going to create a custom output cache attribute. Okay, so first of all, let's add a new folder and let's call it common, and let's add a class file. So this folder is going to contain all the common code that we are going to use. So let's add a class file and let's call it partial cache attribute. And first of all, let's go ahead and import the namespaces that we need. So we need system.web.mvc. We need system.web.configuration, and we need system.configuration. Okay, so this partial cache attribute is going to extend the output cache attribute. So I'm going to inherit from the output cache attribute class. Now let's include a constructor for this partial cache attribute. So a public constructor, and to this constructor we're going to pass cache profile name. So what is this constructor going to do? This constructor is going to read, the cache profile settings from web.config file for us. Okay, and obviously the cache profile settings are present. So the cache profile is basically present within output cache settings. Okay, so we need to read this output cache settings section from web.config file. And to do that, anytime we want to read anything from web.config file, what is the class we use? We use web configuration manager class. So web configuration manager class, and we need to get a section from web.config file. So I'm going to use this get section method, and you specify the path for the section. So the path is going to be system.web. Within that we have caching section. So caching, and within that we have output cache settings section. So that's the path. Okay, now this get section, look at that, it returns an object, but we know this get section, what section is it going to return? It's going to return output cache settings section. So we're going to get output cache settings section, and let's give it that meaningful name. Output cache settings section is equal to, so we need to typecast the object type to output cache settings. So all we are doing here is we are getting that section. Since that is returning a type of object type, we need to typecast it to be of type output cache settings, and we are storing whatever this function is returning in this variable. Okay, so within output cache settings section, so within web.config file, within output cache settings, what do you have? You have output cache profiles, and there is a cache profile with this name 1 minute cache. So what I'm going to do here, so output cache settings section, so that's the name of the object, dot, there is a property output cache profiles, and then you can specify, I mean basically indexer, you can specify the name of your profile. So what's the name of your profile? 1 minute cache. And what is this going to return? This is going to return an output cache profile. So we are going to store that in an object of type output cache profile, and let's call it output cache profile. Okay, so now what we need to do using this output cache profile, so at this point we have reached into this profile, and so obviously we have duration here, vary by param. Not only that, there are several other attributes like vary by control, vary by custom, vary by header. So we need to read all these attribute values. I'm not going to read all of them. I'm going to read whatever I'm interested in. I'm interested in duration. So output cache profile dot duration is going to give me that. Similarly, I need vary by param. So output cache profile dot vary by param. Similarly, you can read all the other attribute values as well, whatever you have specified within web.config file. Okay, so we have our partial cache attribute. So let's build the solution. Now let's go back to the home controller. Now look at this. Instead of using the output cache attribute, I'm going to make use of my custom partial cache attribute. So here I'm going to specify partial. Okay, look at that. For some reason I'm not getting this IntelliSense for this partial cache attribute. Why is that? That's because this partial cache attribute is present in a different namespace, MVC demo.common. So we need to include that namespace within our home controller. So let's include that. And now let's see if we let's actually get rid of that altogether, and then use, look at that, partial cache. And then once I open the bracket, look at that, there are two overloaded constructors, and one of the overloaded constructors is expecting a cache profile name to be passed in. So what is the name of our cache profile? Actually, we did a small mistake here. Within our partial cache attribute, we have hard coded our cache profile name. Instead of that, what we need to do, we can simply pass whatever we are passing to this constructor. So let's go ahead and pass it there. Okay, so now here within the home controller, we are going to pass the name of our cache profile. So what is the name of our cache profile? 1 minute cache. So let's copy that and pass it to the constructor. So once we pass it to the constructor of this partial cache attribute, so that's going to receive that name, and it's going to read that profile values, attribute values from web.config file. Okay, alright, so let's build the solution. So we have applied partial cache attribute only on this child action method. We have not cached the output of the index action method. Okay, so let's build the solution. Let's refresh this view and see if it works. Okay, look at that. The employee list is loaded at 3153. Now, we are not caching this index data, so this time is bound to change, but this time shouldn't change. So let me refresh that. Look at that, this time keeps changing, but this is not changing. So we are able to cache portions of our view. Alright. On this slide you can find resources for basically all my YouTube playlists, a link to my YouTube playlist where all the videos are organized in a logical sequence. You also have a link to my blog where you can find code samples and text versions of all the videos. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.